From the streets to the boardroom, a story of second chances. The city night was filled with the glow of towering buildings, yet between them hung a strange, heavy silence that seemed to press down on everything. On the fourth floor of a massive glass skyscraper in downtown Chicago, in a corner office overlooking Lake Michigan, stood a man whose entire world was crumbling around him. His name was Aaron Carter, a self-made millionaire who had built his business empire before he even turned 30. A tech prodigy who had once been featured on the cover of Forbes as the next big thing. But tonight, there was none of that confidence that people had come to associate with his name. None of that sharp, determined look in his eyes. Instead, his gaze was fixed on the floor, and his hands trembled uncontrollably, as if the weight of what he was facing had finally become too much to bear. Spread out before Aaron on his mahogany desk was a file, its pages covered with numbers and graphs that told the brutal story of his company's downfall. Each line trending downward like a knife, cutting through his dreams. His company, which had once been hailed as one of the most innovative tech startups in the country, was now slowly bleeding to death. For months, his business model had been failing. Investors had been pulling out one after another, like rats fleeing a sinking ship, and the media that had once celebrated him now whispered about his impending failure. In his mind, only one question kept circling over and over again, haunting him like a ghost he couldn't escape. Where did I go wrong? What mistake did I make that brought me to this moment? That same night, in a narrow alley on the south side of Chicago, far removed from the gleaming towers and the world of corporate success, sat a poor man whose reality couldn't have been more different from Aaron's. His name was Raymond, though most people just called him Ray. Ray had nothing to his name except an old, tattered backpack and a small plastic bowl that he used to collect whatever spare change people might toss his way. His clothes were torn and faded, stained with the dirt and grime of the streets, and his face bore the kind of exhaustion that comes from years of surviving rather than living. A kind of weariness that settles deep into your bones and never quite leaves. But despite everything, despite the poverty and the hardship and the countless indignities he had endured, there was something remarkable in Ray's eyes, a peculiar brightness, a spark of something pure and unbroken that set him apart from others in his situation. One evening, as Aaron was leaving his office and heading home, his mind heavy with worry about quarterly reports and angry board members, he happened to pass by the alley where Ray usually sat. What caught his attention that night wasn't Ray himself, but rather the scene unfolding before him. Ray was sitting on the cold concrete with a small boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, and he was carefully feeding the child from a paper container of food, breaking off pieces and handing them over with a gentleness that seemed almost sacred. Aaron stopped in his tracks, mesmerized by this display. The thought that struck him was almost absurd in its simplicity. This man has absolutely nothing, not a single thing to his name, and yet here he is, trying to help someone else, trying to make another person's life just a little bit better. That image stayed with Aaron throughout the night, refusing to leave his mind, and by morning, a strange and somewhat reckless idea had taken root. He made a decision that he knew his board members would think was insane, that his investors would probably mock him for. He was going to offer Ray a job at his company. Ray's life had been nothing but struggle from the very beginning, an endless series of hardships that would have broken most people. He had grown up in a tiny rural town in Arkansas, a place so small it didn't even have a traffic light, where his father worked as a day laborer doing whatever back-breaking work he could find, and his mother cleaned houses for wealthy families in the next town over. Ray never got the chance to go to school properly, never learned to read beyond a second grade level. never had the luxury of thinking about dreams or ambitions because survival took up all his energy. When he was just 12 years old, his whole world shattered in an instant. His father collapsed one afternoon while working in the scorching heat, clutching his chest and gasping for air. Ray watched helplessly as his father died from a massive heart attack right there in front of him. And he cried so hard that day that he thought his heart would break into pieces that could never be put back together. After that tragedy, Ray's mother worked twice as hard, taking on extra jobs and extra hours, but no matter how much she worked, their situation only got worse. The poverty only became more suffocating. One day, when Ray had just turned 16, his mother sat him down with tears streaming down her weathered face and said the words that would change his life forever. "Son, staying here won't give you any kind of future. You need to go to the city, find some work, make something of yourself." With tears filling his own eyes, Ray promised his mother that one day he would lift her out of poverty, that he would make her proud, that all her sacrifices wouldn't be in vain. But when he arrived in Chicago with nothing but the clothes on his back and $20 in his pocket, he quickly discovered that life in the city was even harder than anything he had experienced in his small town. The city was cold and indifferent, and nobody cared about a poor kid from Arkansas with no education and no connections. Ray tried everything to survive. He washed dishes in restaurants where the kitchen staff would yell at him, and the managers would dock his pay for the smallest mistakes. He drove delivery trucks through the night, fighting to stay awake on dangerous roads. He worked in a small factory where the chemicals made him sick, and the foreman treated him like he was less than human. But every single time, he was rejected, cast aside, told he wasn't good enough. Time and time again, people fired him, not because he did bad work, but simply because he was poor, because he had no one to vouch for him, because he didn't fit into their world. One particularly devastating day, when Ray didn't even have enough money left to buy a single meal. When his stomach was cramping with hunger and his hope was at its lowest point, he found himself sitting in that alley with his plastic bowl, asking strangers for help. From that day forward, Ray's life took on a new rhythm, the rhythm of survival at its most basic. Every day he would sit in the same spot, and most people would walk right past him as if he were invisible, as if he were just another piece of urban debris that cluttered their view. Many times, people shouted insults at him, called him lazy, called him a bum, told him to get a job. Some people even shoved him or kicked his bowl, scattering whatever few coins he had managed to collect. But inside Ray burned a strength that refused to be extinguished, a core of determination that would not let him give up on his humanity. Every night, whatever money or food he managed to gather, he would share with the homeless children who lived nearby, kids who reminded him of himself at that age. He believed with absolute conviction that if he received something, even something small, he had an obligation to share it with others who needed it just as much as he did. This wasn't charity to him, it was simply the right way to live. When the idea of hiring Ray first entered Aaron's mind, he immediately questioned his own sanity. Why would I hire someone with absolutely no qualifications, no skills, no experience in the corporate world? He asked himself. But then he remembered the look in Ray's eyes, that inexplicable light that seemed to shine from within, and he realized that Ray possessed something that none of his highly educated, expertly trained employees had. Something authentic and real that couldn't be taught in business school. Aaron made his final decision. He would give Ray a chance, consequences be damned. When Aaron tracked down Ray and told him about the job offer, Ray literally couldn't believe what he was hearing. He thought it was some kind of cruel joke, that this wealthy man was mocking him, that any moment the punchline would come and he'd be left feeling even more humiliated than before. But when Aaron actually took him to his office building, led him through the gleaming lobby with its marble floors and its fountain, and gave him a real position with real responsibilities, Ray's eyes filled with tears. For the first time in his entire life, someone had actually believed in him, had seen him as a human being with value and potential, rather than as trash to be swept aside. Ray approached his new job with a seriousness and dedication that amazed everyone around him. He arrived at the office before anyone else every single morning, sometimes so early that the security guards were surprised to see him. He stayed later than everyone else every evening, often working until the cleaning crew came through. He studied everything he could get his hands on, asking questions, taking notes in his crude handwriting, absorbing information like a sponge. He treated every single one of his coworkers with respect and kindness, always ready to help solve their problems, always honest in his dealings, no matter how small the matter. Very quickly, people began to trust him, began to see past his rough exterior to the good man underneath. Ray's work was so exceptional, so far beyond what anyone had expected, that he earned promotion after promotion, climbing the corporate ladder with a speed that shocked the entire company. But Ray's journey was far from easy, and the road ahead was filled with obstacles that tested him in ways he had never imagined. He faced constant confrontation from colleagues who resented his rapid rise, who whispered behind his back that he didn't belong, that he was just some charity case that Aaron had taken pity on. Many people tried to undermine him, tried to sabotage his work, tried to prove that a former homeless man could never truly succeed in their world of business and power. There was one particular senior employee, a man who had been with the company for 15 years, who would openly mock Ray in meetings, calling him the beggar and making jokes about checking his pockets for loose change. But Ray refused to be broken by their cruelty. He let his work speak for itself, proved his worth through results rather than words, and slowly but surely won over even his harshest critics. Ray's hard work and unexpected success left Aaron both amazed and humbled. But the greatest test of Ray's character and integrity was still to come. One day, the company's largest client, a massive corporation that accounted for nearly 40% of their revenue, presented them with a huge project, a complex software development contract that could save Aaron's struggling company and restore its former glory. The success of this project would literally determine whether the company survived or went under, whether Aaron's decade of work meant something or ended in bankruptcy. But this project was so technically complicated, so far beyond anything they had attempted before, that even the company's most experienced engineers were terrified of taking it on, afraid that failure would permanently damage their professional reputations. Aaron made a decision that shocked everyone in the company. He was going to put Ray in charge of this critical project. He reasoned that if Ray had shown such incredible honesty and work ethic so far, perhaps he could bring that same dedication to this challenge and somehow pull off a miracle. But this decision was met with outrage and disbelief from most of the company's leadership. People confronted Aaron in his office, their voices raised in anger and fear. How can you give such enormous responsibility to a former homeless man? They demanded. This is completely insane. You're going to destroy everything we've built. He doesn't have the technical knowledge. He doesn't have the experience. He's going to fail and take all of us down with him. When Ray learned that this massive responsibility had been placed on his shoulders, He felt his heart sink with fear and doubt. He sat alone that night, his mind spinning with anxiety. How can I possibly complete a project like this? He thought. I don't have any technical education. I barely understand half the terminology these engineers use. I'm going to let everyone down. But then, from somewhere deep within himself, he found that same strength that had kept him alive on the streets. That same refusal to give up that had defined his entire life. He made himself a solemn promise. He would make this project succeed no matter what it took, even if he had to work day and night without rest, even if he had to learn an entire field of knowledge from scratch. Ray immediately began asking his coworkers for help, swallowing his pride and admitting what he didn't know. To his surprise and gratitude, many of them responded with genuine support, spending hours explaining concepts to him, sharing their knowledge freely. Ray spent every night watching online tutorial videos, teaching himself programming languages and project management techniques, pushing his mind harder than he ever had before. He worked with such intense focus that he began to see solutions that others had missed, began to understand the problems in ways that his technical training had never limited. But just when the project was nearing its deadline, when success seemed finally within reach, disaster struck. Marcus Webb, a senior engineer who had resented Ray from the very beginning, who had always seen him as a threat to his own position in the company, decided to sabotage Ray's work. Marcus secretly stole critical data from the project files, corrupting weeks of work and hiding the backup copies. His reasoning was petty but powerful. If Ray succeeds with this project, he'll take my place in this company. He'll make me irrelevant, and I can't let that happen. When Ray discovered that his data had been stolen and tampered with, that weeks of painstaking work had been destroyed, he felt devastated, crushed by the weight of this betrayal. For a moment, he wanted to give up, wanted to admit defeat and accept that maybe all those people who said he didn't belong had been right all along. But Ray did not surrender. Instead, he reached out to his team, the same people who had helped him learn, and explained what had happened. Together, they rallied around him, working around the clock to help him recover. Ray drew upon the old methods he had learned, the street-smart problem-solving skills that had kept him alive, and he developed an entirely new approach to the project's central challenge. This new solution didn't just complete the project successfully, it actually opened up new possibilities for the company, innovative approaches that none of them had considered before. The client was so impressed by the final result, so amazed by the creativity and quality of the work, that they immediately signed contracts for even larger future projects. Ray's triumph turned him into a legend within the company overnight, the ultimate underdog success story. But the biggest surprise came when Aaron called Ray into his office one afternoon and made an announcement that left Ray speechless. "Ray, I want you to become my business partner," Aaron said, his voice filled with emotion. "Your dedication and integrity have taught me that true success isn't measured in profit margins or stock prices. It's measured in character and in how we treat other people. You've saved this company, but more than that, you've reminded me why I started it in the first place." Ray's transformation was now complete. He brought his mother to Chicago and bought her a beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood where she could finally rest after decades of struggle. He established a school in his hometown in Arkansas, a place where poor children could get the education he had been denied. But Ray's journey didn't end there. He was just getting started. He used everything he had learned to help reshape the company's culture, implementing new systems that gave every employee a voice, that valued ideas based on their merit rather than on who spoke them. The company's performance improved dramatically. not just financially, but in employee satisfaction and innovation. One day, Ray received an unexpected phone call that would test his character once more. An old acquaintance informed him that Derek, the man who used to kick him when he sat in that alley, who used to spit on him and call him worthless, who had been one of his cruelest tormentors during those desperate years, had fallen on hard times and was now living in poverty himself. Ray felt a complex mix of emotions wash over him. Part of him remembered the pain and humiliation Derek had caused him, but another part of him, the part that defined who he truly was, felt only compassion. "Bring him to my office," Ray told his friend. "I want to help him." When Derek walked into Ray's corporate office, he was terrified and deeply ashamed. This was the same man who had once mocked Ray mercilessly, who had pushed him and degraded him, who had treated him as less than human. But now Derek stood before Ray with his eyes cast down, his hands shaking, his voice barely a whisper. "Ray, I came to apologize," Derek said, tears streaming down his face. "I treated you so terribly, and now my own life has fallen apart. I have nothing left, and I don't deserve your help, but I'm begging you." Ray took a deep breath, looking at this broken man before him, this person who had once caused him so much pain. He placed his hand on Derek's shoulder and said words that would define his legacy. "Derek, I forgive you. But remember this, never try to tear another person down. Never treat anyone as less than human, because every single person has something good inside them, something valuable that deserves to be respected." Ray gave Derek a job at his company, gave him a chance to rebuild his life, to find his own redemption. Derek's gratitude was overwhelming, and he threw himself into his work with honest effort, determined to prove himself worthy of this second chance. Ray's compassion and generosity made him more than just a successful businessman. It made him a true leader, someone people wanted to follow not out of obligation, but out of genuine respect and admiration. One afternoon, Aaron called Ray into his office for an important conversation. "Ray, because of you, my company has risen from the ashes," Aaron said with deep sincerity. "Without you, I would have lost everything. But more importantly, you've taught me what really matters in life." Ray smiled and replied with the wisdom he had gained through his journey. "Aaron, I've learned one simple truth. When you help others, life finds a way to help you back." After that conversation, Aaron made a momentous decision. He handed over complete control of the company to Ray, stepping back from the daily operations. "Your hard work and integrity have shown me that real success means changing other people's lives for the better," Aaron explained. "I want to spend more time with my family now, and I know this company is in the best possible hands." Ray's life had completed an impossible transformation, from a homeless beggar sitting in an alley with a plastic bowl to the CEO of a major corporation. But despite all his success and wealth, that core humility and simplicity remained unchanged within him. Under Ray's leadership, the company became more than just a business. It became a force for positive change. He transformed it into a place where every employee was valued, where everyone had the opportunity to share their ideas regardless of their position or background. He established a charitable trust fund dedicated to providing education for underprivileged children, giving them opportunities he had never had. This wasn't just corporate philanthropy or a tax write-off. This was Ray's mission, his way of honoring the struggle that had shaped him and honoring his mother's sacrifices. One day, when Ray returned to his hometown in Arkansas, memories flooded over him like a river. He remembered the day his mother had sent him away, the tears in her eyes as she told him to seek a better life. Standing in that same small town where his journey had begun, Ray fulfilled a promise he had made to himself long ago. He built a large, modern school building and named it Margaret School after his mother. He made a commitment that every child in that town would receive a quality education, that no child would have to face the barriers he had faced. This act of generosity elevated Ray's reputation beyond the business world. He became a symbol of hope, proof that transformation was possible. Ray's story spread across the country, inspiring people from all walks of life. People began to see him as more than just a successful businessman. They saw him as a hero, as living proof that poverty doesn't define potential, that circumstances don't determine character. His journey taught an invaluable lesson. It doesn't matter how poor you are, how many times you've been knocked down, how many people have told you that you'll never amount to anything. If you have integrity, if you work hard, and if you dedicate yourself to helping others, you can achieve absolutely anything. The real secret to success that Ray discovered and lived by wasn't about how much money you accumulate or how high you climb in your career. It was about how many lives you touch, how many people you lift up, how much positive change you bring into the world. Ray had transformed his life into a mission of service, dedicating himself to helping others find the opportunities and dignity that he had once been denied. In the end, Ray's journey from the streets to the boardroom wasn't just about personal success. It was about redemption, forgiveness, compassion, and the unshakable belief that every human being deserves a chance, that every person has value, and that the measure of a life well lived isn't found in bank accounts or corner offices, but in the lives you change and the hope you give to others who have lost their way. Conclusion and call to action. Ray's extraordinary journey from a homeless man sitting in a Chicago alley with nothing but a plastic bowl to becoming the CEO of a thriving corporation stands as a powerful testament to the transformative power of human compassion and second chances. His story teaches us that true success isn't measured by the wealth we accumulate or the titles we hold, but by the lives we touch and the hope we restore in those who have lost their way. Ray proved that integrity, hard work, and a genuine desire to help others can overcome even the most impossible circumstances. He showed us that our past doesn't define our future, that forgiveness holds more power than revenge, and that when we lift others up, we ourselves rise higher than we ever imagined possible. In a world that often judges people by their circumstances rather than their character, Ray's life reminds us that every person deserves dignity, every human being has untapped potential, and the greatest investments we can make are not in stocks or real estate, but in the dreams and possibilities of those around us. If this story moved you, if Ray's incredible transformation inspired something within you, then please hit that like button right now, because your support helps us share more stories that can change perspectives and touch hearts. Think about someone in your life who needs to hear this message today, someone who's struggling, someone who's lost hope, someone who needs to be reminded that their circumstances don't define their destiny. Share this video with them right now, because you never know how powerfully the right story at the right time can change someone's entire life trajectory. And if you want to hear more true stories of resilience, redemption, and the incredible power of the human spirit to overcome impossible odds, then subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that could inspire you to see the world differently. Remember, every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. So be kind, offer grace, and never underestimate the power of giving someone a second chance. Your engagement, your shares, and your support don't just help our channel grow. They help spread messages of hope to people who desperately need to hear them. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And remember, the life you change with one act of kindness might just end up changing your own life in ways you never expected. See you in the next story.